Hi there, my name is David Price, the David Price on the internet, a co-founder at RedwoodJS, and I am excited to show you design-driven full stack. It's a workflow for dynamic full stack application development that lets you go from front-end design, CSS, HTML, to then React components, and then designing your React components for state using mock data fetching, which seamlessly allows you to continue on to your backend API. You'll be able to scaffold your CRUD UI, have database queries, and at the end, a secure by default API, all with one integrated workflow. And it was only made possible to do it this way with RedwoodJS. RedwoodJS is a full stack, fully integrated, and feature-rich application framework that lets you go from side project to startup fast. It's built for modern multi-client applications and infrastructure, and Redwood integrates all the tools, libraries, and frameworks you need, React, GraphQL, Prisma, and many others, so that you can build JavaScript or TypeScript full stack applications. Redwood's not the only tool I'll be using in this workflow. I'll also use Storybook, integrated out of the box with Redwood, which is a framework for designing your components in UI in isolation. And I'll also be using Tailwindcss, which is a utility-first CSS library, also integrated but optional with RedwoodJS, and Tailwind UI, which I've paid a license to use, which takes the HTML and CSS of Tailwind and gives you the React component code that you need so you can start with your front end. Sound good? All right, if you want to continue the discussion about full stack design-driven development, please follow up with me on Twitter, or I'll create a Redwood forum post where we can continue the discussion, and I would love to respond to your feedback or questions there. So let's get started. And speaking of getting started, where do we typically want to start with a full stack application? Well, we want to start with a front-end design. So this is Tailwind UI, and this is a team page, and we'll talk about the components I want to build here, but look, here's the code behind the scenes. This is our starting place. This is where we need to begin, is with the HTML, CSS, and code for our React components. But where we want to end up is a dynamic full stack application. This is the same code, but now inside of my local dev app running the local server. If I refresh that, you'll see I'm on localhost 8910 for a Redwood server on a team page. And here I have a CRUD UI. I've already filled out some information. I'll save that. It's now in my local database, and look, if I refresh this page, I now have a dynamic page that's data-driven. So that's our goal. The problem is there's a missing piece in most workflows between these two endpoints: the framework front-end code and the framework back-end code, including database queries, and that missing piece is fetch. In order to design in an integrated process, you need to be able to mock your fetch so that when all the pieces are done in isolation, they seamlessly have already been fit together. So let me introduce you to Redwood cells. Redwood cells are an innovation for React components that in one component, a single component, it combines all of your fetch, in this case we're using GraphQL queries, and all of your state. So using a Redwood generator, you would end up with this code for a cell component. Query at the top, loading, empty, failure, and success at the bottom. And this is what makes it possible to integrate the processes from front-end development to back-end development. And that's what I'm going to show you in this workflow. Okay, on the left side, let me explain a little bit more how this is going to work. This is a screenshot of the team page. And I'll have a component that wraps all the others, and that's my page component for our team. That'll include the header and the description in Latin, apparently. And then I'll have all of my members, and each one of those will be a component. And to demonstrate this missing piece, which is typically how this development is done, all of this would be done in isolation, and then the data piece would be figured out later. But with Redwood, we can actually insert the fetch right here via Redwood cell. Let me show you what that's going to look like. I will add a component between the page and the member, and that component will be a cell component. And I'll call that my team members cell component. Doesn't like the spelling of that. My team members cell component. And this is where fetch and state will happen so that I can iterate over my member components. So that's it. I'll have 3 components and 1 design-driven full-stack workflow to go from front end to secure, by default, API backend. Here we go. All right. This is where I'm starting, from a brand new, freshly installed Redwood project. On the right side, I ran yarn create redwood-app in a project directory design-driven full stack. So that's done. The only thing that happened after that was I upgraded this so I would be code base equivalent with Redwood version 1. I've given the Redwood info over here so you can see which Canary version I'm running on. And again, this will be mostly equivalent to Redwood version 1. The first thing I'm going to do, oh, and by the way, we'll talk more about the Redwood code base, but it's a yarn workspace. So I have a proper web directory, which ends up being all of my web assets, which can be deployed to a CDN, and API, which can be deployed either to traditional servers using a Fastify server or serverless. It builds out the separate functions that would run on AWS Lambdas, for example. And we'll get to that in a bit. All I'm going to do right now is run yarn redwood storybook. And instead of starting with the local development server, I'm now starting with a Storybook server. And we'll see that right here. Localhost 7910 is where Storybook will run. But let's get it fired up first. And again, this is the first thing I'm doing after installing my code base. I didn't have to set up anything else to get Storybook to run. And here we go. There we are. Couldn't find any stories in your Storybook. That makes sense because we haven't initialized Storybook at all. One other tip I want to point out, Redwood comes with accessibility features built in. So you'll notice that Storybook is already doing an accessibility check. We won't talk much more about that in this workflow, but there's a lot of great documentation about that online. Okay, so next up, let's create that team page. Redwood has generators for that. Yarn, Redwood, generate, page, and I wanted to name the page team. There we are. And let's see what got created. We updated our routes file. We have a team page. By the way, Redwood has full TypeScript support. I'm using JavaScript for this demo. We have a stories file that was generated, and we have a test file. Redwood also ships out of the box with an end-to-end test suite. On your front end, it's using React testing library, and on your back end, you get services, a test database, unit tests, all of that running integrated with Jest. We won't talk much about that, but I wanted to explain what those files are. And what we want to look at is, well, I'll open up for here, and then I'll show you my shortcut keys later. We created a component for page. Team page, there it is. And look at this, updated instantly, team page. You can find where the file is for that React component, and all of this with the Storybook server updated instantly. So that's great. But now I forgot one thing. I told you we're going to use CSS, Tailwind CSS. So let's go ahead and add that now. Yarn, Redwood, RW is short for Redwood, setup commands. I'll tell you what that does. UI, Tailwind CSS. Setup commands are a special type of command in Redwood that does initialization, instantiation, config, installs package, all inside of one command. And what that allows us to do with Tailwind is make Tailwind fully compatible with Redwood out of the box and also fully compatible with Storybook out of the box. You'll notice that that didn't update over on the right side, and that's because of the way that Tailwind compiles. I need to restart the Storybook server, no problem. We'll see that kick in, and then instantly we'll see the styles over on the team page. While that's taking effect, the next thing I want to do is drop in the component code for Tailwind UI over here into my team page. There we go. Now we have styles that are already applied instantaneously. And by the way, if that seemed too easy, it should, because what I just did probably would have taken you a couple hours on your own. All right, flipping over to, here we are, our team. And what I want now is the code for the team page. So let's start dropping that in. Now here is a way of mocking state, which is basically creating a constant. We'll go ahead and grab that because I want this page to be working for now. And I don't need, I've got my boilerplate over here. I'll keep the meta, and all I'll need is this. I'll go all the way down, copy and paste my old friend. We'll keep the meta tags. Yep, there we go. Drop that in. Let the linter do its work, and let's see what we've got. Boom. That seems too easy. Thank you, Tailwind UI. All right, we have an Our Team page, and this is working great. And again, this is typically how React component design and code work is done in isolation. So this is working great, but it's not dynamic, right? I'm having to do a few workarounds, and this is not something, adding this const people at the top is not something that I would want to have in my final application. Let me clean up a couple things real quick that we don't need. All right, and our next step, if you remember the screenshot that I showed you in the mockup, is I'll go ahead and create that cell for our team members. So let's start there. Next up, clear that, get to the top, yarn redwood generate cell, and that'll be team members, right? This will be the fetching component, handles our state all inside of one component, and it's going to iterate over a member component eventually. There we go. Let me show you what gets generated there as well. Wow, we got a lot. Oh, you know what? Because I didn't update everything. But we get team members cell, mock, which I'll show you, stories, and test. And we also have our page. Let's go ahead and commit some of this. Styling. There we go. I just committed it all. And we'll continue on by creating team member. Command P brings up my team member cell.js. Okay, very good. And again, we have our query at the top. Here's our different states. And look over here, storybook side. Boop, empty, failure, loading, success, failure. Look at that. Let me show you how this works. Nothing to see here. I'll save that. And instantly, I am mocking state inside of my React component isolated design process. Again, this should blow your mind just a little bit that I'm not only doing isolated component design, but I'm actually mocking for state based on data fetching. Why don't we go ahead and pull up that, the wrong thing. Let's go ahead and pull up that team member story, and mock is where I want to go, because let's go ahead and mock some data here before we drop in the code for our team member cell. If you remember on our team page, let's go ahead and we're going to break some things for a little bit, but I want to pull that people constant out. And what I want is this object. And you'll see I've got an ID, and that's something I'll need to include because it doesn't exist yet. Let's go ahead and drop this in. We'll keep everything else the same. I want to add an ID. That'll be an int, so ID 1. There we go. And why don't we go ahead and add 2 more? Just do some copy and paste. Not sure if I copied the correct thing. And all I'm doing here, well, I should explain what I'm doing, is I'm setting up the mocks for my data fetching so that I can mock the state for success and make sure that that's working well. More information available about this on the RedwoodJS docs about how all this works. And we can do better with our code here. Let's go back up to the preview. We're going to grab Whitney. She'll be a copywriter, I see. Grab her image. Not her image. And let's go ahead and grab, who do I have so far? Let's grab Courtney. And I'll grab her image. All of this is so our mocks will look good locally, and I can test them out. All right, I saved that ID name. The next thing I want to do, back over my team member cell, is I want to make sure this query has the same data structure as my mocks, right? Look, I'm not even designing my component yet. I'm actually thinking about the data structure I need for my component code. Pretty cool. Okay, name and role, image URL, Twitter URL, LinkedIn. And there we go. That's a structure I'll need for my cell that I'll eventually create. I think we're done with the mock for now. Okay, go ahead and close that out. Next thing I want to do is build out my success component down here at the bottom. We're going to bring some code over from the team page. Let's see where we need to get. I want to start here. Okay, I'm going to grab everything between those ULs. Let's go ahead and add in our team member cell. I don't have this yet. Team members cell there. And I'll be importing that from the top. We don't need that import anymore. And here we'll import team, not the stories. There we go, team member cell from. Let's go ahead and find that. Components, team member cell. There we are. Okay, getting close. Go ahead and remove this. Oh, not all of that. Let's go ahead and remove this from the page. That should be everything we need on the home page, or the team page. And we'll add that to the cell. Okay, I'm not sure if I need that for reference yet. Comment that out. And here we go. Okay, let's see what happened over with Storybook. I haven't pulled that up for a while. So our empty, failure, and loading are okay. Our success is, well, that's our mock data, so that's okay. Team page should be broken right now, and that makes sense because our cells, our team member cell hasn't been completed yet, and that's included inside of the team page. So I would expect this. There should be an error there. All right, let's keep working down. Team members. So here we go. Team members. So everything that's people right now, I want to map that over team members. Call that a team member. Not, oh, you know what? I got an easier way to do that. Check this out. Let's rename the symbol to team member. That got updated everywhere. That's a great shortcut. I think everything else there looks pretty good. I don't need that anymore. And let's save. Let's see what's happening with our success state. Okay. Did you see what happened? I hope you're getting excited right now. I now have a React cell component. It's mocked and designed in Storybook, and I have empty, failure, loading, and success. If I were to go in and change anything, where's the name, right? So indigo, let's make that green, right? I can do design in isolation on my React components, but all of that is done with a mocked fetch, which is going to allow us to keep going to the back end, right? Pretty cool? Come on, that's so cool. Okay, keep my original colors, and how are we doing? We're good. Now there's one hiccup here, and that's once I added the mock. The mock is I need to restart my Storybook server, and that's simply because it's not doing a hot reload when I added those mocks specifically for the wrapper component, which is the team component in this case. Anyway, just need to reload that, and then we'll be seeing the cell included inside of the team page, which again is pretty fantastic given the fact that, let's see if that came up yet, given the fact that that's actually loading the cell data as well. So a team member's page is now including the mocked data because it's including the team member's cell. Do you see how that's working out? Remember that screenshot with the component structure that I showed you. Again, your mind should be blown just a little bit right here because this is awesome stuff. All right, we have one more thing to do, and that is create that team member component, which will not be doing our fetch. Because for me, when I'm working with cells, I like my cells to really focus on the dynamic aspects of my components. So I'm going to be doing my fetch, my iterating, and I'd like all of the design-specific HTML and CSS to be inside of a separate component. So let's go ahead, and you can believe that Redwood has a generator for that. So yarn Redwood generate component, and this will be a team member. Earlier it was members plural. This is for one individual member. There we are, created 3 files. You shouldn't be surprised by that now. We have a team member, that's a React component, stories, and test file as well. And if I open that up, team member, there we are, and there's our component. Very simple and boilerplate. Okay, going over to my team member cell, what do I want to include here? We are going to, got the map, team member name. Let's go ahead and we'll grab this. Yeah, right. Yes, because everything inside of that I want to include. So here is where we'll bring in a team member. And the team member, well, I can go ahead and import that. Team member, okay, that looks good. All right, so team member. I'll need a key. Team member dot, ID. Let's switch that. And we'll want to pass in team member. Need us some props. Team member, and that's it. That should work. All right, and everything else, what's the problem there? We'll come back to that. Everything else, we're going to move over to our new team member component. I grabbed a div, can drop that in, and let's see what we've got. Okay, that makes sense. Need to bring that in. Team member, and let's see what we've done. We have a page component, right? Team member page. Okay, team page. Yep, we've got some things that are broken, but that makes sense. Import team member from team member. Oh. You saw that, didn't you, the first time I did it? Oh, so much fun. Hey, instant feedback. Closing the feedback loop, iterating more quickly, better developer experience. All right, empty failure loading success. Looks good. Team page looks great. And how are we doing on this component? All right, because we need some mock data here as well, right? Again, we're working in isolation right now. The good news is I've already done that mock data. So let me go to the team member story. .stories.js, right? And check that out. So what I can do here, I already have some mock data. Let me go ahead and pull that up as well so you can see what I'm working on there. So team member cell mock. We'll put this over to the side, right? We have an export and we have our data, and that's what I want to import here. Standard. And remember, standard is a function from, we need to get team member cell and team members mock. And then here, return team member, and we need to pass in team member, and that'll be standard. Just a function, and let's go ahead and get a team member. It's team members, plural. Why don't we go ahead and let's grab Whitney. I need a better ID, don't I? I see an error here. Those should all be 2 and 3. All right, what did I do wrong with standard? Didn't spell it correctly. Again. Okay, let's see what we have. Cannot read properties. Team member component. Cells look good. There we are. Just had to change my props. All right, so everything is done on my front end, all of my HTML and CSS. I'll work from the inside out. I have a team member component with mock data. I have a team member cell, which handles my empty state, failure state, loading state, and success state. And all of that, the component that's wrapping those two, is a team member page, which is showing the cell information and the additional page information. And all of this has the fetch data structure I need. We've mocked our data so that everything is ready to integrate with our backend API. And again, this is what's been that missing piece before. The front-end team could work in isolation, the back-end team could work in isolation, but the way that they work together made it really messy when it came time to integrate the parts. So unless you were a large team with resources to figure this out for your own stack, you probably weren't able to do what I'm about to show you on your own before. And that next piece, let's go ahead and check in the team member cell and component done. Complete. Let's check in that code. And let's start doing the back end. And you better believe that Redwood has some helpers for you here. All right, let's start our development server, yarn redwood dev. And now what we're going to switch over to is not the Storybook server, which we'll leave running, but we're now switching over to, don't need that anymore, the Redwood dev server, which will be our, it's going to spin up a Webpack dev server for the web, Fastify server locally for the back end, for the API. Okay, we're looking good. Let's go ahead and not mock, but let's create our data structure for our database, our data model. We've been working out of the web yarn workspace directory so far. Let's go into the API, db source, inside of source, directives, functions, GraphQL. You can read more about those on our docs. I'm not going to spend much more time here. Let's go ahead and look in the DB. And I mentioned before that we're using Prisma. And we already have mocked, we know what our data structure is, right? So if I pull the team member cell over here, right, this database model needs to look like this team member's query. So over here, I'll leave the ID. I'll leave that as a name. I'll spell it correctly. That can be a string for now. We'll keep this really simple for now. We'll go with a role. Keep this all simple. Don't worry about any of the other things. Image URL, Twitter URL, LinkedIn URL. All of those need to be strings. No. Sometimes those helper pop-ups don't work so well. If I save that, it'll format. If you are a front-end developer primarily, and you've been nervous because you don't know how to do back-end development, you can do this. Because as a front-end developer, I know the data structure I need to run my components and make them dynamic. And all I did was bring those over to the back-end database model. And then the next step, get another terminal here, is I can create a database migration. So think of that like a snapshot of the state that I want to apply to my database. Yarn redwood prisma is a new command. Migrate dev. That's not going to work. Let's get a V at the end. And this will take that data model and apply it to my local database. Members, you know what? I missed one thing there. That's not going to work. I need to rename my model, and I'm glad I caught that ahead of time. And my model needs to be team member, capital, team member, because again, in my database, this is one team member. It's not plural, it's individual. And that naming convention helps me find my way across my full stack application. Not required, just helpful. And let's go ahead and redo our database migration. Yarn, Redwood, prisma, migrate, dev. And this is where I'm taking a snapshot and creating a migration for that model team member that I didn't save. But see, I'm catching it. I'm catching it before I get to the errors. So, hey, my live demo, recorded live demo is working well. Name for migration, team member. All right. And this is setting up the database I need locally. And here's where it gets really fun. It's great to have my database working, but what I need are endpoints. I need the API so that my front end can hit the back end endpoints and all of this can be pieced together. I'm not going to code that. I'm going to run a generator for it. Yarn, Redwood, generate. We call it a scaffold. And I want the path for this to be at the admin path because this will be an administrative CRUD UI, admin, and then I pass in team member. That's the model that I created. And watch what happens. You thought back-end development was hard. It's because you haven't done it with Redwood yet. Look at all the components and code I just created. I created services. That's where my business logic lives. I created SDL files. That's where my GraphQL queries need the schema definition language. And Redwood handles your GraphQL resolvers for you so that now, if I refresh this page already refreshed, look at what I have on the back end. I have team members new. I can edit. I have my team page. Let's take a look at that. There's nothing to see here because I was already handling state inside of my cell components. And then if I go here to admin team members, I now have a UI for all of my CRUD for the team members model in my database. No team members. Let's go ahead and create one. And who should we create? We haven't created Tom Cook yet. Let's go to Tom. He was like, what was his role? He's a director. That's good enough for now. Let's get Tom's image URL. Drop that in. We don't need this information for now. Hit save, and spoiler alert, we now have a fully dynamic application. I mean, come on, how great is that? Now look, I'm not done yet. We went all the way from front-end design to our back-end API. We're querying a database, and there's one more gift you're about to receive from Redwood. Do you remember that I said the API is secure by default? What I need to do now is add auth. Yarn, Redwood, generate, setup, auth. There are a lot of auth providers. Redwood has its own authentication, and there are a lot of, here you go, a lot of built-in providers that are supported out of the box. Redwood has its own self-hosted version called dbAuth. We'll go ahead and use that for now, dbAuth. And I'm not going to do anything other than run the setup command for auth. There'll be a few other things I need to do. I've got a login page and a logout and a sign-up page, and all those come with dbAuth. But for now, I just want to show you one thing that Redwood makes easy that normally is really hard. And that's the fact that, let me just zoom in on that bad boy, right? I can't query my members anymore because I don't have permission to, because that endpoint is secured by authentication. Now, that sounds hard, right? Well, turns out it's not with Redwood. If I go into the GraphQL, team members SDL, I don't need this anymore, and I take a look, I have these directives on my query that say require auth. And if I change this to skip auth, now I've created a public API. Boom! You can do this too. All right, this is design-driven full stack using RedwoodJS, and I would love to have your feedback and your discussion. What do you think of this? Because we are just getting started. Redwood is at version 1 soon, by the time you watch this video, and there is so much more we can do. We're collaborating directly with the Storybook team. You better believe that they're excited for us to enhance this. We are looking into the Storybook story test runner and how we can have first-class integration for that as well, so you can test your stories across state in your cells. There is so much more to come, but for now, you can get started today with design-driven full stack using RedwoodJS. Thank you. I'll see you on the internets.